What is up, New Beginnings Church? Happy Wednesday morning to you. Happy hump day. Let's get you over the hump. I've got a great story. We're in Mark chapter 4, and we're moving off parables for a minute because the book turns back into some narrative, some storytelling. And this is a very famous story about Jesus being on the water when a great storm arises. And just want to read this story to you and then share with you a couple observations. And so Mark 4, verse 35 says, that day when evening came, Jesus said to his disciples, "Let us go over to the other side." Now, if you're underlining, you need to underline that right there. That little red letters, let us go to the other side. That's the last thing that Jesus said, right? Leaving the crowd behind, they took Jesus along. Just as he was in the boat. There were also other boats with him. A furious squall came up, and the waves broke over the boat, so that it was nearly swamped. Jesus was in the stern, sleeping on a cushion. The disciples woke him and said, "Teacher, don't you care if we drown?" Well, he got up, rebuked the wind, and spoke to the waves and said, "Quiet, be still." Then when the wind died down and it was completely calm, Jesus spoke to his disciples and said, "Why are you so afraid? Do you still have no faith?" And they were terrified and asked each other, "Who is this, that even the wind and the waves obey him?" Powerful story, really just about how sometimes you can just feel like life is out of control. And by the way, it is. Control is an illusion. You have control of very, very little outside of you. Most of what you have control over is actually inside of you. You have control over your own thought life or managing your own emotions. You have control over how you respond, what you're going to say. So control outside of you is a bit of an illusion. And the disciples are learning that. They were master fishermen. They'd grown up on the lake. They lived as fishermen. They were experts. And even they were like, "Hey, we're going to die. We're out of control." And then the funny thing about life is this, is that whenever your life seems out of control, you're convinced that it's because God is asleep, right? Have you noticed that? Like, God's not answering my prayers. God's not doing his job. God's not doing what I think God ought to do and what I would do if I were God. And so we get this idea that Jesus is asleep in the midst of our storm. But what this shows you is that, like, God is always in control, regardless of whether I'm in control or not, regardless of how crazy the world may be. God is still in control. And so a few observations. The thing that you have to remember is he challenges in this thing, "Why are you so afraid? Have you no faith?" That fear and faith are opposites. You cannot be afraid, and be fully confident in God at the same time. Those things are mutually exclusive ideas. If you're fearful, you're not being faithful. Let me say that again. If you're fearful, you're not being faithful. We need to rebuke the fear, right? And here's why. I think he asked this question. He gets woken up. He rebukes everything. He goes, "Why are y'all so afraid?" I think what you could say is, what was the last thing I told you? I said, let us go over to the other side. Bless God, if I said we're going to get to the other side, you don't have to worry about any storm in your life, because what I said will come to pass. And so you got to lean in and say, "Hey, what has God spoken to me? What are the words of God that I'm clinging to, that I know? I'm just going to cling to what Jesus said and let everything else be in his control." Here's another observation too, and this is a Jesus observation, is that the disciples were talking about the storm. Jesus decided to speak to the storm. And I think sometimes you have to take that kind of an attitude towards your problems. Be like, I'm not just going to be a complainer. A complainer is a person that talks about their problems. I think somebody who gets proactive with their faith is somebody who says, "Hey, I'm going to talk to my mountains. I'm going to let them know what God has said, what the scriptures say, where my faith is. I'm going to let them know. I'm going to put them on notice." It's a totally different idea. And then the last thing I want to show you is this, is the very last verse says that the disciples were terrified, and it implies at Jesus, because they asked each other, "Who is this? Even the wind and the waves obey him." You know, one of the ways that you fight fear is with fear. Meaning, you're going to have every reason in life to be afraid of this or afraid of that, the pandemic this, the economy that. Like, okay, the question just becomes this. You're going to be afraid of something. What will you fear the most? And what the disciples determined was, holy cow, that guy controls the wind and the waves. I'm afraid of him. And I think they developed a reverence and an awe, what we would call the fear of God in that moment. Like, holy smokes, do I have so much reverence and awe for this person. I've got more fear of God than I do of the things of this world. And so if I'm going to have a fear, I might as well direct it with the right direction. And I'm going to have a healthy fear of God, which is full of honor and reverence and respect. I'm going to fear God way more than I fear any of the things of this world. So the way that I'm going to fight my stupid fears is by fearing somebody who's worthy to be given reverence and awe. Can I get an amen to that? Church, I love you so much. May you be full of faith, and may your faith overcome your fears today as you boldly go and claim whatever it is that God has for your life. I love you guys so much. God bless you. I'll see you tomorrow.